Have you ever held on to something for too long? Not because it was good for you, not because it made you happy, but simply because it was familiar. It was the world you knew, the air you were used to breathing. This kind of holding on is a quiet affair. It doesn't make a sound. It lives deep inside, in the corners of your heart where you store your oldest habits. It's the worn out sweater you can't throw away, the chipped mug you reach for every single morning. It's the path you walk home, even when there are shorter, brighter ways to go. The familiar feels safe, even when it hurts. We often mistake this familiarity for love or for loyalty. We tell ourselves stories to justify staying put. We say, this is just how it is. We think it's not so bad. We convince ourselves that the known pain is better than the unknown future, and realizes the comfort they've been clinging to has become a cage. A beautiful, cozy cage, perhaps, but a cage nonetheless. They see the patterns, the repeated circles, the same conversations playing out like a script they know by heart. The familiarity no longer feels like a warm blanket. It starts to feel like a weight, a heavy, invisible burden that they have been carrying for so long they almost forgot it was there. The world praises loud endings, but so much of real change happens in the quiet. It's a slow internal turning, a private shift in perspective that no one else can see. It is the courage to admit, just to yourself, that this is no longer your story. It's the bravery to turn the page without needing an audience to watch you do it. It begins with a quiet, honest whisper to your own heart. It starts with a simple, powerful realization that you deserve more than just what is familiar. There is a unique kind of exhaustion that comes from holding it all inside. It's the fatigue of a silent attachment. On the outside, everything looks the same. You smile, you go to work, you make the coffee, but on the inside, a quiet battle is being fought. Every small act feels a little heavier. Every "I'm fine" takes a little more energy. It's the feeling of walking through deep water where every step requires immense effort, but no one around you can see the struggle. This story is made of memories. It's built from moments that once brought joy, but now bring a quiet pang of sorrow. The scent of a certain perfume, the sound of a particular song on the radio, a joke that only two people would understand. These small triggers become anchors holding you in a past that is no longer serving you. You find yourself navigating your own life like a museum of what used to be. It's a private war waged in the early morning hours before the sun comes up. It's the long pause before you fall asleep, when the day's distractions fade away and you are left with the truth of how you feel. You are holding on to a version of yourself, a self that believed in a different future. And letting go of that feels like a betrayal. It feels like erasing a part of your own history, a part of who you are. So you hold on tighter, trying to protect that memory. But the soul knows when it's time to move on. A feeling of hollowness after a conversation. A sudden urge to walk a different way home. A moment of clarity in the middle of a mundane task. These are not grand revelations. They are small, gentle nudges from within. A peace that is not loud or triumphant, but calm and steady. A peace that can only be found on the other side of a quiet, honest goodbye. This is where our story begins. In that silent space between holding on and letting go. The house was not just a collection of rooms. It was a museum of memories. Every object held a story, a specific moment captured in time, like an insect in amber. There was the small, faded photograph on the nightstand, its corners soft and worn from being touched so often. It captured a smile that felt a million miles away now, a moment of shared laughter that echoed only in her mind. To throw it away would feel like admitting that moment never mattered. it would be an act of violence against her own history. So it stayed a silent monument to a time she could no longer return to. She found herself walking through her own life as if she were a curator, carefully preserving exhibits of a past she both cherished and was chained by. The heavy winter coat hanging in the closet, still smelling faintly of his cologne, a scent that could instantly transport her back to a cold evening, walking hand in hand. She would trace the rim of his favorite coffee cup, the one with the small chip on the handle, and remember the countless mornings they had shared. She would straighten the crooked painting in the hallway, a piece of art they had argued playfully about before finally agreeing on its place. These small acts were not conscious decisions. They were reflexes, automated movements born from years of shared existence. Letting go would mean retraining her hands, her eyes, her very body to forget these ingrained habits. Who would she be without these memories to define her? The fear of the unknown was not just about the future. It was about losing the person she had been. The days began to fold into one another, each one a near-perfect copy of the last. Her routine was a carefully constructed fortress, designed to keep the chaos of real feelings at bay. The alarm would ring at the same time, the coffee would be brewed the same way, the same route would be taken to work. This routine was her shield. It provided structure in a world that felt like it was crumbling from the inside. The empty chair at the kitchen table seemed to shout its vacancy during her solitary breakfast. The silence in the car on the way to work was filled with the ghosts of past conversations, of laughter, of songs sung loudly and off-key. Every routine, once a source of shared comfort, was now a stark reminder of what was missing. She was performing a duet by herself, playing both parts in a play that had long since closed. She would tell herself this was just life. This was what grounding felt like. But the truth was, the routine was a cage built from her own fear, or even just sleeping on the other side of the bed felt like a betrayal. It felt like a step into a future she hadn't chosen and wasn't ready to face. So she continued the dance. She moved through the steps she knew by heart. It was a form of emotional hibernation, a way to pass the time until the pain subsided. But the pain did not subside. It simply learned the rhythm of her routine and settled in, becoming a quiet, constant companion in her well-ordered life. The human mind is a powerful storyteller. It can weave intricate narratives to make sense of the most painful situations. And so, she began to build a story to justify her stillness. She told herself that staying was a sign of strength, of unwavering loyalty. Good people don't just give up, her inner voice would say, sounding suspiciously like the voice of society of old movies. She convinced herself that this period of quiet sadness was a test of her character, and to leave would be to fail that test. It's not that bad, she would reason, focusing only on the good memories, polishing them until they shone so brightly they blinded her to the present reality. Every relationship has its problems, she would argue, minimizing her own silent suffering. The fear of judgment from the outside world also played a powerful role. What would people think? The thought of having to explain was exhausting. It was far easier to maintain the facade of normalcy. Announcing an ending felt like admitting a public failure. Staying silent seemed like the more dignified choice. She was not a person trapped by familiarity. She was a person choosing to honor a commitment. This justification was the final lock on her cage. It was the intellectual barrier that prevented her from seeing the truth that the familiar had become a slow poison. And the loyalty she was so proud of was a loyalty to her own unhappiness. The fatigue began in the mornings. It wasn't the normal drowsiness. It was a deeper, more profound weariness, a weight that seemed to settle on her chest the moment she opened her eyes. The sunlight that streamed through the blinds felt less like a gentle awakening and more like an unwelcome spotlight demanding a performance she no longer had the energy to give. On the surface, she still moved with purpose, but each action was accompanied by an unseen cost. Choosing an outfit felt like making a decision of immense consequence. She was running on a reserve tank of fuel that was getting dangerously low, and no amount of sleep seemed to replenish it. She would find herself pausing in the middle of a simple task, and a wave of inexplicable tiredness would wash over her. It was the soul's exhaustion from holding on too tightly for too long. Her body was beginning to register the protest that her mind kept silencing. Mornings, which should be a time of renewal, became the hardest part of the day. She would look at her reflection and see the tiredness in her own eyes, a subtle dullness that makeup couldn't quite hide. The fatigue seeped into her interactions, hollowing out conversations until they were just empty shells of connection. She would find herself in the middle of a discussion, nodding and smiling in all the right places, but her mind would be a million miles away. The words of others seemed to reach her through a thick fog, their meanings muffled and distant. She would respond with practiced phrases. "That's interesting. How nice. I'm doing well, thanks." Each phrase was a small, carefully placed brick in the wall she was building around herself. Phone calls became particularly draining, her body language betraying the calm in her voice. After hanging up, she would sink into a chair, feeling as though she had just run a marathon. The silence that followed these calls felt like a blessed relief, a moment to drop the mask and breathe. Even conversations with the person she was attached to became hollow. The topics grew safer, more superficial. They carefully navigated around the vast, silent sea of things left unsaid. Each conversation was a carefully choreographed dance to avoid stepping on the cracks in their foundation. This avoidance was more exhausting than any argument. This hollowness left her feeling profoundly lonely, even when she was surrounded by people. She was there, but she was also not there. This disconnect was the ultimate symptom of her fatigue. The silent attachment was not just tiring her out, it was slowly erasing her, replacing her genuine self with a hollow echo, a polite and weary ghost.